You feel it, don't you? That quiet voice in your head saying, this version of you isn't enough. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg for attention. It just sits there in the background of your mind, patient, watching, waiting. You can distract yourself from it for a while. Scroll through another feed. Watch another video. Tell yourself you'll figure things out later. But eventually the silence returns. And when it does, that voice is still there, reminding you of something uncomfortable, that the person you are right now is capable of more discipline, more strength, more control, more purpose. But you tried to ignore it. You tried to stay comfortable, because comfort is seductive. Comfort tells you that you're doing fine. Comfort tells you that things will work out eventually. Comfort whispers that you deserve a break, that you've already tried hard enough. But deep down, you know the truth. Comfort is a trap. It keeps you exactly where you are, and something inside you refuses to stay ordinary. You feel it when you watch someone who has built something real. You feel it when you see discipline in action. You feel it when you realize how much time has already passed. And suddenly the question appears, what am I actually doing with my life? That question is dangerous, because once it enters your mind, you can't fully escape it anymore. You start noticing the gap between who you are and who you could become. The gap between potential and reality. And that gap creates pressure, real pressure, the kind that makes you uncomfortable, the kind that forces you to confront your habits, your distractions, your excuses. Because the truth is simple. The life you want demands a different version of you. Not slightly better, not a little more motivated, different. Stronger habits, stronger mindset, stronger discipline. The version of you that can build that life does not exist yet. And that realization can either break you or transform you. Most people choose the easy option. They ignore the voice. They bury it under entertainment. They convince themselves that tomorrow will be different. But tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next year. And eventually the voice disappears. Not because they succeeded, but because they stopped listening. That's how potential dies. Quietly, slowly, under layers of comfort and distraction. But something about you is different, because you're still hearing the voice. You're still feeling that pressure. That pressure is not your enemy. It's a signal that your mind has already realized something important. The version of you that exists today cannot carry the life you want tomorrow. Something must change. Not your circumstances, not your luck. You. And that's where the real transformation begins. Because the moment you accept that truth, you stop waiting for motivation. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You stop waiting for someone else to push you forward. Instead, you start asking a different question. A harder question. What do I need to become? That question is where comfort ends and transformation begins. Because becoming something powerful requires destroying something weak. And the weak version of you will fight to survive. It will whisper excuses. It will remind you how easy life used to feel. It will tell you that discipline is unnecessary, that suffering is pointless, that effort is overrated. But deep down, you already know that's a lie, because nothing extraordinary has ever been built through comfort. Strength comes from pressure, discipline comes from struggle, and transformation comes from pain. That's the price of becoming dangerous. And the world never tells you that price in advance. It just presents you with the choice. Stay the same, or become something stronger, something sharper, something harder to ignore. And the moment you accept that choice, your life stops being comfortable, but it starts becoming powerful. Most people never change, not because they can't, because they won't suffer. That's the truth nobody likes hearing. People talk about growth. They talk about ambition. They talk about becoming better. But the moment real discomfort appears, they disappear. Because change is not motivational. It's painful. It requires you to abandon the habits that once made you feel safe. It requires you to confront your own laziness, your own distractions, your own wasted time. And most people would rather protect their comfort than face that reality. They want success without sacrifice. They want discipline without pain. They want respect without earning it. But life doesn't work like that. Life has never worked like that. Strength is not given. It's forced out of you. Not through easy days. Not through comfort. Through pressure. Through failure. Through humiliation. Through the moments that make you question everything. Those moments are where real growth begins. But most people run from them. They avoid situations where they might fail. They avoid challenges that might expose their weakness. They avoid responsibility that might force them to grow. And slowly, their life becomes smaller, more predictable, more comfortable, more limited, because comfort slowly removes ambition. Every day you choose comfort over growth. You become slightly weaker, slightly slower, slightly less capable. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually, like rust slowly forming on metal. At first, it's invisible, then it spreads, until one day the structure that once looked strong collapses. That's how potential dies, not through sudden failure, through slow neglect, through endless distraction, through the decision to postpone growth again and again. Meanwhile, somewhere else, someone is making a different choice. While you delay action, they're building discipline. While you chase temporary pleasure, they're building resilience. While you search for motivation, they're creating habits. And those small differences compound, day after day, week after week, year after year, until the gap between you becomes impossible to ignore. From the outside, it looks like they were simply more talented. But talent is rarely the difference. Sacrifice is. Because success demands something most people refuse to give. Time, focus, consistency. The willingness to endure discomfort without immediate reward. That's the price. And most people look at that price, then quietly walk away. They convince themselves it's not worth it. They tell themselves life should be easier. They tell themselves they deserve comfort. But life doesn't respond to what you deserve. It responds to what you build. And building something meaningful requires pressure. Pressure to improve. Pressure to adapt. Pressure to evolve. Without pressure, there is no reason to grow. That's why the strongest people you'll ever meet usually come from struggle. Because struggle forces transformation. It removes illusions. It exposes weakness. It demands action. And eventually it forces you to choose. Stay comfortable or become capable. Most people choose comfort. Not because they're weak. Because they're afraid. Afraid of failing. Afraid of looking foolish. Afraid of discovering their limits. But the people who become dangerous learn something different. They stop fearing pain. They start using it. Because pain is information. It tells you where you're weak. It shows you where you need to improve. It forces you to become sharper, stronger, more disciplined. And once you understand that, pain stops being the enemy. It becomes training. The ruthless truth. Look around. The people who beat you in life aren't always smarter. They're not always more talented. They're not always more lucky. But they are willing to do something most people avoid. They sacrifice. They give up comfort. They give up distractions. They give up the version of themselves that prefers easy days. And that single decision changes everything. Because life doesn't reward potential. It rewards consistency. There are millions of people with great ideas. Millions with dreams. Millions who talk about what they want to become. But talking has never built anything. Action does. And action requires discipline. Discipline requires sacrifice. While you chase comfort, they chase growth. While you chase pleasure, they chase power. That's the brutal difference. Every day you spend avoiding discomforts, someone else is building strength. Every hour you spend distracted, someone else is sharpening their focus. Every excuse you make, someone else is removing theirs. And slowly, almost invisibly, the gap begins to grow. At first it's small, almost unnoticeable. But time multiplies everything. 1 year of discipline creates a small advantage. 3 years creates momentum. 5 years creates dominance. By the time most people realize what happened, the distance is already too large. And from the outside, it looks unfair. It looks like success appeared overnight. But overnight success is a myth. What you're really seeing is years of quiet sacrifice finally becoming visible. Years of work when nobody was watching. Years of discipline when motivation disappeared. Years of choosing growth over comfort. That's what creates people who seem unstoppable. Not magic, not luck, just relentless consistency. Meanwhile, the majority of people stay exactly where they started. Not because they lack intelligence, because they lack commitment. Commitment to doing the hard things repeatedly. Commitment to staying focused while everyone else is distracted. Commitment to becoming someone different. And that's where the real danger appears. Because if you stay the same, while others evolve, eventually you reach a moment where competing becomes impossible. Not because they're superhuman, because they've spent years transforming. While you spent years waiting for motivation, waiting for the right opportunity, waiting for confidence. But confidence doesn't come before action. It comes after discipline. It comes after repeated effort. It comes after surviving the moments that most people quit. The people who pass you in life didn't avoid pain. They embraced it. They treated struggle like training. Failure like feedback. Pressure like preparation. And over time, that mindset creates something powerful. A person who is difficult to stop because they're not relying on motivation anymore. They've built something stronger. Habits. Habits that continue moving forward, even when emotions disappear, even when progress slows, even when the world becomes difficult. And habits are dangerous. Because habits compound. Small actions repeated daily eventually create massive results. A single disciplined day doesn't look impressive, but thousands of them build unstoppable momentum. That's how ordinary people become extraordinary. Not through inspiration, through repetition, through showing up when it would be easier not to, through choosing growth even when comfort is available. And once someone builds that mindset, they become almost impossible to compete with. Because while others hesitate, they act. While others complain, they adapt. While others quit, they continue. And that's the ruthless truth that most people don't want to face. The difference between the life you have and the life you want is often just discipline. Discipline most people refuse to build. But the moment you accept that truth, everything begins to change. Because now you know what the real enemy is. Not other people, not circumstances, comfort. And the moment you stop protecting comfort, you begin building power. The moment something snaps. One day something inside you snaps. Not dramatically, not in front of other people. Quietly, internally. It's the moment when excuses stop sounding convincing. The moment when comfort stops feeling relaxing and starts feeling like a cage. For a long time, you tolerated the situation. You tolerated wasted time. You tolerated your own bad habits. You tolerated the gap between who you are and who you know you could become. But eventually, that gap becomes impossible to ignore. You start noticing patterns, the same distractions, the same excuses, the same promises to start tomorrow. And suddenly you see the truth clearly. Tomorrow has been your plan for years. At realization, it's hard because it forces you to confront something uncomfortable. No one is holding you back. No one is controlling your future. The only person responsible for your life is you. And once that truth becomes clear, something changes. You stop asking, why is life hard? Because life was never supposed to be easy. Easy lives don't build strong people. Easy paths don't create discipline. Easy choices don't create power. Instead, you start saying something different. Something most people are afraid to say. Good. Good that it's hard. Good that it requires effort. Good that it demands discipline. Because difficulty is the filter. Difficulty removes the people who only wanted success in theory. It removes the people who wanted results without sacrifice. Difficulty leaves only the people who are willing to earn it. And once you see pain that way, your entire mindset shifts. Pain stops looking like punishment. It starts looking like training. Failure stops looking like humiliation. It starts looking like information. Suffering stops looking like unfairness. It starts looking like transformation. This is where the old version of you begins to die. The version that waited for motivation. The version that blamed circumstances. The version that avoided pressure. That version cannot survive in a disciplined life because discipline demands responsibility. It demands consistency. It demands the ability to move forward even when you don't feel like it. At first, this new mindset feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. Your old habits try to pull you back. Your old routines whisper that you deserve another break, that you already tried enough, that you can start again tomorrow. But now those excuses sound different, weaker, because you've already seen where they lead. Stagnation. And once you recognize stagnation, it becomes impossible to tolerate it anymore. So you begin making small changes, not dramatic ones, just consistent ones. You start showing up when you promised you would. You start finishing the work you used to postpone. You start doing things even when motivation disappears. Those small actions begin rewiring your identity. Slowly, quietly, but permanently. The boy who needed comfort starts losing control. The man who values discipline starts taking over. And the moment that shift happens, your life begins moving in a completely different direction. The pain you choose. Pain will visit you either way. That's something most people never fully accept. They spend their lives trying to avoid it, trying to escape discomfort, trying to build a life where nothing feels difficult. But that life doesn't exist. Pain is unavoidable. It arrives whether you prepare for it or not. The only real choice you have is which kind of pain you're willing to live with. The pain of discipline or the pain of regret. The pain of discipline is heavy at first. It demands effort. It demands focus. It demands that you do things you don't feel like doing. Waking up early when your body wants to sleep. Working when your mind wants to relax. Training when your muscles are already tired. Studying when distractions are everywhere. At the beginning, discipline feels brutal because it forces you to confront your weaknesses, your lack of consistency, your lack of control. But something interesting happens when you endure it long enough. The pain begins to change. It becomes lighter, more familiar, almost normal, because the discipline that once felt impossible becomes routine. And once discipline becomes routine, your entire life starts improving. Your focus sharpens. Your confidence grows. Your results begin to compound. Not overnight, but steadily. Meanwhile, there's another kind of pain. The pain most people quietly accept. The pain of regret. Regret feels easier in the beginning. Doesn't require effort, it doesn't require sacrifice. It only asks you to stay comfortable, stay distracted, stay exactly where you are. At first that feels harmless, even relaxing. But regret grows heavier with time. Every year it becomes louder. Every missed opportunity becomes harder to ignore. Every moment wasted becomes more obvious. You begin seeing people your age moving forward, building careers, building strength, building lives they once only dreamed about. And that comparison creates pressure. A painful question begins forming in your mind. What could I have become if I had taken things seriously? That question is heavy. Heavier than any workout. Heavier than any early morning. Heavier than any discipline routine. Because regret is permanent. Discipline is temporary. That's the difference most people misunderstand. The short pain of discipline builds freedom. The long pain of regret builds a prison. And most people choose the prison. Not because they're weak, because comfort is seductive. Comfort convinces them they have more time, more chances, more tomorrows. But time is ruthless. It moves forward whether you're prepared or not. Every day you delay discipline. The cost becomes higher. Every year you postpone growth. The gap becomes larger. Until one day the life you wanted feels unreachable. Not because it was impossible, because you waited too long. That's the brutal reality. Pain is guaranteed. The only question is which pain you're willing to carry. The pain that builds strength, or the pain that builds regret. One builds a king, the other builds a prisoner. And the world is full of prisoners who chose comfort when discipline was available. But the moment you choose discipline, you break that cycle. You stop being controlled by impulses. You stop being controlled by distractions. You stop being controlled by comfort. And once that happens, your entire future changes. Because discipline doesn't just change your habits, it changes your identity. It turns ordinary people into dangerous ones. People who can handle pressure. People who can endure discomfort. People who can continue moving forward when others stop. And those are the people who eventually dominate their environment. Not through luck, through relentless discipline. The day they notice. One day people will look at you and say, "You changed." At first they'll say it casually, almost like an observation. But if you listen closely, there will be something else behind their words. Confusion. Because they remember who you used to be. They remember the version of you that was comfortable. The version that joked about discipline. The version that delayed things until tomorrow. The version that moved through life without urgency. But now something about you feels different. You move with more focus, more control, more intention. You speak less. You observe more. You don't react to every small problem anymore. You don't argue about things that don't matter. Your energy is directed somewhere else, toward building something real, toward becoming someone stronger. And that change doesn't happen overnight. It's built through quiet decisions, the decisions nobody sees, the early mornings, the disciplined routines, the moments where quitting would have been easier, but you didn't. Those moments slowly reshape your identity, until one day the old version of you no longer exists. And when people say, "You changed," they're right. Because the weak version of you, the comfortable version, the version waiting for motivation, is gone. That version believed life would eventually reward effort. But the version of you standing here now understands something different. Life rewards discipline. Not intentions, not potential. Discipline. So you stopped waiting for power. You built it, piece by piece, habit by habit, one brutal day at a time. Every difficult morning, every focused hour, every moment where you chose growth instead of comfort. Those choices stacked together until something powerful emerged. A person who doesn't rely on motivation anymore. A person who can handle pressure. A person who moves forward even when things feel uncertain. And that's what makes someone dangerous. Not aggression, not arrogance. Control. Control over your habits. Control over your focus. Control over your direction. Because once a person gains that level of control, they become difficult to stop. Life will still test them. Challenges will still appear. But they don't collapse under pressure anymore. They adapt. They learn. They continue moving forward. And over time, that mindset builds something unstoppable. Not overnight, but inevitably. That's the path you're on now. The path most people avoid. The path where comfort is replaced by discipline. Where excuses are replaced by action. Where ordinary habits are replaced by powerful ones. And it all started with a simple decision. The decision not to stay the same. So now the question's simple. Will you stay the same? Or will you become someone no one can ignore? Because the world doesn't remember the comfortable. It remembers the dangerous, the discipline, the relentless. And the moment you choose that path, your transformation truly begins.